One, two. Erin!
Hey,
How you doing, girl?
I'm doing.
That's right. Hi, I'm Emmy Wildwood. I am a musician, a producer, a artist, an art director, a composer, and Erin's favorite person ever.
Oh my gosh, so true. My name's Erin Mars. I am a writer, director, actor, jack of all trades, person who loves entertainment. So let's
Yeah,
jump in.
love it.
Um, Today we are going to be talking about a film that did not get an Oscar nomination. I think Emmy and I are both we did that the last few episodes. We focused on those types of films. The Oscars happened. We're moving on, right? Everybody wants something new, something fresh,
Yeah,
correct?
I feel like there's like we did a thing where we were like focusing on the Oscar movies so we could see like where everyone's head was at. We really dug into the Oscars, and you know
Mhm.
what? I think we took from it. We took from it that we want to watch whatever we want now.
Exactly. Yeah. So today we are watching, or we watched, and we're going to be talking about The Last Showgirl starring Pamela Anderson. And incorporated with this episode, we're thereby going to be talking about the band Motley Crue. Wow. Yeah.
You may be asking yourself, why Motley Crue?
Hmm.
And that would indicate that maybe you don't know that Pam Anderson was married to the drummer of Motley Crue, Tommy Lee,
Tommy Lee. Hmm.
and they had an infamous tumultuous relationship that
Hmm.
made a lot of headlines when a sex tape leaked onto the
Yes.
internet.
But let's start with the film. Let's talk about The Last Showgirl. So, Emmy, you watched this before me and you were very high praise about this film. And I watched it and I totally agreed. So, let's talk about it. The Last Showgirl, written by Kate Gersten, it's based on Body of Work by Kate Gersten. So, she wrote the book and she wrote the film. And it is directed by Gia Coppola. Now, Gia Coppola, you might recognize the Coppola name. She is the granddaughter of director Francis Ford Coppola. She made her feature film directorial debut with Palo Alto in 2013, and she's since directed Mainstream, which came out in 2020, and now The Last Showgirl, which came out in 2024. She's the only child of film producer Giancarlo Coppola and Jackie de la Fontaine. Her father died in a speedboating accident while her mother was pregnant with her
Her mother was pregnant with her when
when
she
her father
died.
died. When
Oh,
her
when her
father died.
father died. Okay.
Yeah, so she never really knew her dad. And really quickly, because I think it's just very fascinating about the Coppola family. They're everywhere in Hollywood. So we've got Francis Ford Coppola, we've got Sophia Coppola, who is her aunt. We have Nicolas Cage, who's a first cousin once removed. You
Whoa.
have Jason Schwartzman, who's a first cousin once removed. Robert
No.
Schwartzman, first cousin once removed. And there's a bunch of other Coppolas, but those are the big ones that people tend to really know. So I,
Hashtag born into the right family.
yeah, hashtag you're gonna work in entertainment.
Yeah.
You know, she also began her career. She was hired to make short films for Opening Ceremony, the clothing line, which starred Kirsten Dunst and Jason Schwartzman, her cousin, and Zach Posen, who said that she's going to be the next Coppola force to be reckoned with. So Coppola made her directorial feature film debut with Palo Alto, an adaptation of James Franco's short story collection of the same name. The
Really?
film, yeah. So that film premiered in Orizzonti section of the 70th Venice International Film Festival, as well as the 38th Toronto International Film Festival and the Telluride Film Festival in Colorado. After befriending James Franco, Coppola was asked to adapt and direct his collection of short stories, Palo Alto. And she said she agreed to do the project because of how well she connected with the source material. And when working on the film, she drew inspiration from films such as American Graffiti, Fast Times at Ridgemont High, The Outsiders, and The Virgin Suicides. Now, let's talk about the film The Last Showgirl to really kind of get into it. So, This film had its premiere at the Toronto International Film Festival with a limited theater release in the United States. Pamela Anderson got generally positive reviews from critics and got a lot of critical praise. She actually received nominations for the Best Actress award at the 82nd Golden Globe Awards and the 31st SAG Awards, while Curtis received nominations for Best Supporting Actress. And we're talking about, sorry, Curtis is Jamie Lee Curtis, who's also in this film. She got nominated for Best Supporting Actress at the latter, so also at the 31st SAG Awards, as well as the 78th BAFTA Awards. In The Last Showgirl, Coppola explores themes of aging and reinvention in the entertainment industry. She was inspired by Pamela Anderson's depth and resilience, drawing parallels between Anderson and Marilyn Monroe. So here's the general plot, right? Shelley Gardner, she's 57-year-old showgirl who's performed for 3 decades in Le Razzle Dazzle, a classic French-style revue at a casino resort on the Las Vegas Strip. Her co-stars in the show now include several younger women, including Marianne and Jody, who view Shelley as almost like a mother figure. Shelley's older friend, Annette, maintains a close kinship with Shelley despite having been ousted from the show years prior, and she now works as a cocktail waitress. Eddie, the producer of the show, breaks the news that the Le Razzle Dazzle is due to close in about 2 weeks due to declining ticket sales, and it's going to be replaced with a more contemporary neo-burlesque show. Marianne and Jody begin auditioning for roles in other shows, despite Shelley's objections that they are low class and too risque. With no means for retirement and few resources, Shelley worries for her livelihood. She reaches out to Hannah, her semi-estranged daughter. Hannah lives with family friends for much of her adolescence and is now a student in Arizona. Hannah briefly visits Shelley at her home, but their reunion is marred by Hannah's emotional distance and Shelley's lack of realism. Shelley shows lack of knowledge of her daughter, forgetting her daughter's age and asking her if she has declared a major in school. Hannah later, per an invitation by Shelley, attends the Razzle Dazzle performance unbeknownst to Shelley. And afterwards, she confronts her in the dressing room, offended that her mother prioritized the show over caring for her. Annette and another older cocktail waitress are shown having their shifts cut early in favor of younger new hires. Shelley auditions at a casting call, also attended by Marianne, and the audition goes poorly. As Shelley is clearly nervous and unfamiliar with modern auditioning, the director stops Shelley early and plainly tells her she is not a talented dancer. I want to kind of like get into some of the key points in the film and why I think, to me, it really hit in a really deep way certain scenes and was incredibly, I think, impressive.
So, like, right off the bat, this movie overall to me is about the choices that women are forced to make in the face of pressure that society puts on them to be the perfect American specimen of a woman. Having to choose between family or career, these sort of difficult, impossible choices to go for your dreams, but also, you know, stay home and be a mom, a stay-at-home mom. I mean, it's confusing. These messages that we get from every direction as a woman. And I don't think there's been a movie yet. I mean, I think the Barbie movie briefly touched on this, like America Ferrera's speech in it was kind of
Mm-hmm.
about this whole thing. But
Mm-hmm.
this is the first movie that's really shown how this applies and discusses, you know, the trickle-down effect. This is a movie about how women choosing career can strain relationships around them. And
Yeah.
mhm.
And I was going to say, I think it's really fascinating that we have Pamela Anderson as the lead because you look at her own life, she's been a sex symbol for a long time. She was married to a rock star, but she had that like cute little body, very beautiful, but she's got like the big breast implants and this cute little figure. And she was known as being like super sexy. And with that, I think there's a little bit of cynicism that people then have on actresses who are totally cool going nude and having a little bit of that wild side, which being married to Tommy Lee, I think she kind of got associated with that party rocker lifestyle. As a person, I know she's a big animal advocate and isn't truly that way, but I thought it was very powerful to have her cast as Shelley because of the way that there's an echo between her own real life circumstances and what we see this character going through, right? It's like, what happens to the Playboy bunny when they're 50 years old? We know what happens when they're 20, but hopefully they get to be 50 and older. But what if they've never come out of that, right? It's like you're stuck in that fantasy. It's got to change. She's made a choice to be a performer, and performers, it's based on looks. And for that type of performance, she's in a show where women are topless. We don't really see that much of that, but it's considered a classier show, but there are some topless women in the show. And, you know, some people wouldn't think that's super classy.
To your point, her being cast in this role is the answer to the question the movie is asking, which is that can older women who have been performers their whole life, who have been known as the Playboy Bunny, reinvent themselves? And the answer is right there inside Pamela Anderson being cast in this role. Yes, it's the same industry, but she's in a more of an indie film, a more respectable kind of role. She's reinvented herself in this. If you embrace your age, if you embrace exactly where you're at and you're a little bit flexible, you can move on to sort of the next thing that feels good and in line with everything you've done before that. Sometimes a movie poses a question and you're left sort of with inner turmoil or inner conflict, like, oh, I don't know. And it makes you question yourself. And like, that's the director's intent. But this director, a female, actually sort of answers that question for women by putting an inspired actor, an older woman who's reinvented herself in this role.
There's something happening in this moment where we have, in this past year with The Substance, with Demi Moore, we've got The Last Showgirl with Pamela. These are women who they're older, but they were and kind of in some ways still are sex symbols, right?
Mhm.
And I think it's awesome that they're both have these movies where they're the lead. Now, they both in both films, it's about sexism to a degree, right? It's
Mhm.
about the way that age impacts a woman's career as someone who's being seen, as an entertainer, and the way that they kind of get aged out of the career that they have. The one thing I will say about this film that The Substance doesn't touch on, there's a certain level of vulnerability. And I have to say, I was so impressed with Pamela Anderson's performance. There's a few moments you're watching her and you almost can feel the inside of her heart breaking. She's this adult, but inside it's like she's still this little girl
Mhm.
and is so sad that this dream that she feels like she's been living is coming to an end, right?
Mhm.
But also in the way that she is with the other younger girls in the show and the tenderness that she shows to them. I thought she did an incredible job with that. I mean, the scene where Kiernan Shipka, who plays Jody, shows up at her house and is like, Jody, please let me in. Or sorry, she's like, Shelly, please let me in. My mom's not talking to me. I didn't know, like, after doing something like this, I couldn't go back. I didn't know I could never go back. Like, please, I really need to talk to you, please. And Shelley's like, no, I'm sorry, I can't do that. No. Because ultimately, there is this thing about that character, Shelley. She didn't choose her daughter.
No,
She didn't choose her daughter. She
no.
chose herself.
She reconciles that by saying that she chose her daughter by choosing her career so she could provide for her. And now this is a thing that men often do and don't get in trouble for. You
Mhm.
know, men maybe like work very hard and don't come home very much. They don't have to feel guilty about not being, you know, full front and center as a parent, and women always will. They always will. But you're right. She did choose herself. She chose her career, and there's a why there. You know what I mean? That we don't really know, but she did choose her career. So she is extremely attached to her career because she chose it. She has to make it worth it. She wants people to think the show is fabulous. She has to believe the show is fabulous. She has to believe it was worth it in order to feel
Mhm.
okay. Even when her daughter goes to see the show, she's like, "This is what you gave me to like Friends for, this like nudie 2-bit nudie show." She can't even hear that. There is a contrast between the way she describes the show and the way everyone else is describing the show. And then on top of it, her friend, what that Jamie Lee Curtis plays, Annette. So Annette is another woman who's her age, and she sees herself in Annette. She sees there's somebody else who's out here still doing this Vegas hustle. Like, I'm not the only one. So this is a thing for her. She's in a bit of a fantasy world, right? But like they say you have to be Delulu to make your dreams happen. What about Jamie Lee Curtis in this role as Annette?
Wow. Jamie Lee Curtis is she is dynamite. She is
She
dynamite.
she never stops being dynamite. I mean,
Never.
she did what she does best, which is be quirky, genuine, heartfelt.
It's a real person.
It's a real
You're watching
person.
Annette, and I'm like, I could see this person being somebody's aunt. And it's like the chain smoking older lady who's telling everybody she's born lucky, yet she's working as a cocktail waitress. So it's like,
Yeah.
how lucky are you? You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
definitely probably an alcoholic, wearing the booby shirts, overly sexy, the frosted lipstick. That character, you're like, how old are you? It's like that
Yeah.
person can't really tell how old they are
Yeah,
because of like
exactly.
the heavy party, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
And
you're
like
like
the
maybe
party
you're
never ends.
yeah, you're like maybe I worked with you at that restaurant I worked at. It's like she feels like somebody like
Oh yeah.
she takes her clothes off in this film too. I mean, like that's another thing Jamie Lee does that's like amazing in all her films is she uses her body to the fullest extent as an actor. That's where the comedy bit comes in too. Like she's not
Hmm.
scared to show her imperfect
Hmm.
bod, which is
Hmm.
totally perfect because you know what I mean? Everyone's body's
Yeah.
perfect. But like she doesn't have some ridiculous standard. She's so confident. She can just like she's like, I'm gonna make this role the best it can be, no matter how I look. I was laughing so hard when she was just standing there in her like underpants and her bra in the
Hmm.
changing room. That was hilarious. And her dancing, that scene of her dancing when she's getting drunk is just like so magical. Wow, she's
Oh, it
incredible.
is, but it's also so painful.
Yeah,
It's like you see this moment of
they're stuck. They're
they're
stuck.
stuck.
Yeah.
And it's also their own doing. Whenever there's a story set in Las Vegas, you can immediately make assumptions. It's like it's probably going to have to do with stripping, gambling, drug dealing, some kind of like over the edge, over the top kind of adventure. People who films generally based there kind of have that type of story to them.
hmm
It's, you know, that city that's built in a desert that never really should have existed.
Yeah.
So it is kind of like this magical oasis in the desert, but it's scary. I think there's like an underlying tone to just what that city is and the history of that city. Now, I have friends who live in Las Vegas. They love it. I've never
Hmm.
been to Las Vegas, so
You've
I've
never,
never.
can I please be the one who takes you there for the first time? No, seriously, please, can I go with you for the first time? Just say yes. For
Sure,
crying out
yes.
loud. Thank
Yes.
you. Okay, so listen, I have a few things to say about Vegas. A, it's adult Disneyland. So just let that frame your
Hmm.
brain. It's
Hmm.
like it is a dissociative town. And you know how her character says she has trouble. She goes to New York. She can't really take it. It's not a dissociative town. It is an
Right.
alert. You have to stay alert in New York. So this
Mhm.
Vegas is a town where it never closes. It's everything's always available to you. You're blinded by the lights. So she's happy in that little world. These people who move there, they want to live in this world. Anyways, I thought it was a really great movie. I was very impressed by the costumes, and I was very impressed by how all the shots. It was a very warm, juicy film to look at. It felt
Hmm.
it gave film. I looked it up. It wasn't film, but it gave film. Yeah.
Jason Schwartzman was the casting director.
Huh.
He played, but like the casting director in the movie. So when she does that dance and it's like,
Oh.
hey, like,
Uh,
sorry,
oh,
lady,
we don't
like,
even see him.
you don't really see him. No.
Yeah,
I mean, you kind of get the outline of him and the beard and it's like, okay.
that's really cool.
Hmm.
I'm really glad you loved this movie. Do you know why?
Why?
Because when it counts, you and I are right aligned. This is a film about women and for women. That being said, I think anybody can enjoy it, absolutely. But it's kind of like a dynamically female.
Yeah.
Every angle of what it is at every age, from every angle of what it is to be a woman. And
And it's also tender and ultimately sad. Like
yeah,
I think about, that film Nora and the type of film that is, which is like a slice of life film about people in a certain level in society. This is similar. This is seeing where the, cocktail waitress who's in her later part of her life is living and what is she doing and the showgirl and what is she doing and how are things behind the flash, behind the glitter? What is it happening there? Here's just a little note that I think is really interesting about the casting for this film, right? So when Coppola wanted to cast Pamela Anderson as Shelley, she had just watched her Pamela a Love Story documentary, right? And so she sent the script to Anderson's then agent, who turned it down within an hour of receiving the script without even letting Anderson know about it. So Coppola then reached out to Anderson's son, Brandon, through mutual friends, passing it along to his mother, who had largely given up on acting. Anderson said, I've been handed a lot of scripts in my life, but never a challenge like this. You don't see parts like this when you're working in your bathing suit. I was so drawn to the character. I heard her voice in my head and pictured everything. I thought, oh, this is that thing people talk about when they read material and know they have to do it. Anderson likened the film style and
got
her
a little
emotional.
chill. I got a
I
little
know.
chill. Yeah.
Anderson likened the film's style and her emotional trust with Coppola to the works of John Cassavetes and Gina Rowlands. Curtis agreed to star in the film when director Coppola told her that Anderson was playing the lead character. So, really fascinating. And then their principal photography obviously took place in Las Vegas over the course of 18 days on a budget of under $2 million. Coppola was inspired by nonfiction views of Vegas, from documentaries to the work of the late journalist and art critic Dave Hickey, stating, I didn't look to movies for inspiration on this project. I was looking to photography. I knew this world because of that. Coppola reunited with cinematographer Autumn Durald Arkapow, who shot her 2013 directorial feature film debut, Palo Alto, as well as 2020's Mainstream. They shot The Last Showgirl on 16 millimeter film to capture a raw, grainy quality using a handheld camera and custom anamorphic lenses. The scenes with Curtis were shot first as she only had 4 days available to film in January 2024. The Showgirl costumes worn by the cast in the film were archival pieces designed by Peter Menefee and Bob Mackie,
Oh, they're
some of
Bob
which
Mackie.
mhm,
Wow.
some of which were used in the actual Jubilee review.
Wow. Oh, I'm so glad you told me that. That's
Yeah.
amazing. Yeah, you can tell because quality was different. Things were made different. Costumes used to be so heavy because all of the jewels on them and so forth were glass, not plastic. And because all rhinestones were manufactured glass. That's because glass is actually fairly easy to cut
Hmm.
and it shines more and reflects light more. But ultimately, plastic became cheaper over time. And back then, there were more glass manufacturers. So, I mean, like in the 60s, probably when Bob Mackie was designing them. What ends up happening is there's a richer look to everything, no matter what.
Yeah.
Also, Bob Mackie's known for being like over the top, more maximalism design and just so beautiful, like little
He,
sculptures, all those outfits were.
I mean, legend. Yeah.
Yeah.
He was one of the best known for dressing icons,
Hmm.
entertainment icons. I always think of like, you think Bob Mackie, you think Bette Midler, Liza Minnelli, Farrah Fawcett, Judy Garland, Donna Summer, Tina
Wow.
Turner,
Yep.
Oprah Winfrey, Carol Burnett, Lucille Ball. I mean, these are all people that he worked with and dressed.
Glamour. All glamour. Yeah.
Glamour,
Yeah.
so beautiful. Marilyn Monroe. I mean, he dressed, like there's
How is
just,
that possible? That's crazy.
yeah.
So check it
So,
out. You brought up Pamela, a love story. And so I just want to talk about that for a minute, maybe before we talk about her relationship with Tommy. Her documentary goes deep into her childhood trauma. It talks about her parents. It talks about growing up poor. It talks about how her parents fought aggressively constantly and that she used modeling as a way out of her scenario. And while none of that, I keep talking about we don't know the deeper reason why the character made these choices,
mhm,
but usually people are repeating something they've seen
mhm.
or things that feel like not unusual to them. And I have to guess that Pamela's own experience informed this role because she, as a woman, has had trouble maintaining relationships, probably because of who she's picking. I also watched, by the way, her Hulu show where they recreate the relationship and the trauma of her and Tommy Lee's tape being stolen during
Ooh.
the beginning of the internet, during a time where the internet was the Wild West and there was no regulations, no laws around it.
Mhm.
And she discusses how re-traumatizing it was for her to have that show air because she didn't sign off on it whatsoever. Somebody just made it. And
What? And she
yes.
didn't get wow.
Mm-mm.
Wow.
And that's why she made that documentary about her life because it was like slightly in a response to that to be like, I am not just this like dumb idiot girl who chooses
Mhm.
bad men. I'm like so much more than that and so much more than this one moment in time. And I mean, the truth is someone straight up broke into their house, broke into their safe and stole their tape. Basically, the court decided she didn't own it or have any rights to it. Anyway, so you want to talk about Motley Crue and Tommy Lee?
Yeah, so that's a great segue
Hmm.
talking about Tommy Lee. So, Tommy Lee, I think he kind of had like a little bit of a revival. Remember, he had this like MTV show and he would like rejoin marching bands and stuff. There was some like he had some kind of TV show
Yeah.
flashback with MTV, whatever. Anyway, but let's talk about Motley Crue.
Yeah.
Motley Crue, it's an American heavy metal band. They were formed in Hollywood, California, baby, with bassist Nikki Sixx, drummer Tommy Lee, with guitarist Mick Mars and vocalist Vince Neil. They
Mars.
Yep, they sold over 100 million records worldwide. They've
Wow.
achieved 7 platinum or multi-platinum certifications, 9 top 10 albums on the Billboard 200 chart, including 1989's Dr. Feelgood, which is Motley Crue's only studio album to reach #1. They have 22 top 40 mainstream rock hits and 6 top 20 pop singles. The members of Motley Crue, they are really known as having hedonistic lifestyles, the androgynous persona. You think Motley Crue, even the name Motley Crue is implying the kinds of guys these are, or, the image that these guys have, which is drinking, trashing the hotel room, breaking the stuff, showing up, having a good time. Woo, like, don't control us. We can do whatever. And they really, basically, when they got together, kind of had a party house. Now, if you've watched, there's this great biopic based on the book all about Motley Crue called The Dirt, which, honest to God, I've read a lot of books about bands and rock and roll and all that kind of stuff because that's what's interesting to me. This is one of the best, if not the best, biography on a band. It's called The Dirt, Motley Crue. It's all about Motley Crue. There's stuff in there. It's pretty gross. They talk about just like drugs, girls, there's tons of sex, tons of drugs, tons of girls. And there's music and there's like stuff happening, but all of this also, gets into the point where you're dealing with addiction and all those kinds of things. Here's a Nikki Sixx quote. I wanted a band that would be like David Bowie and the Sex Pistols thrown in a blender with Black Sabbath. That is pretty much Motley Crue.
That's a great description.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
they thrived during a time where like being like a party animal was
Mhm.
like very specific group of acceptance. Like you could find acceptance and identity inside of being like a metalhead, an 80s hair rocker. And it was sort of,
Totally.
yeah, it was like a safe space for being an a-hole and a safe space for like dressing up. It was sort of post-punk, post right coming off of glam rock, a combination of those two things, and it was highly misogynistic.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
and it's so metal in the sense of the way that they spell the name Motley Crue. They have 2 umlauts, which if you don't know what an umlaut is, it's when a vowel has 2 dots above it. That's an umlaut. So Motley Crue, they added the umlauts to the name to make it look more metal.
Mhm.
There's a lot of like Norwegian and Swedish metal bands, and because they're Norwegian and Swedish, they usually have more umlauts in their spellings and stuff. So by
Yeah.
putting that in, it like looks extra metal, like whoa, like Motley, and there's the dots over the O, Crew, and there's the dots over the U. I love umlauts, but anyway,
They're aesthetically pleasing.
they're aesthetically pleasing.
Tommy Lee specifically had behavioral issues. So like everybody in that band was dealing with addiction, but like Tommy Lee like in particular had impulse control issues. He was like always destroying stuff and fighting and cheating, and he really loved drugs, and he was over the top kind of like impulsive spender, like everything over the top, over the top, over the top, over the top, everything. And Pamela was like definitely more innocent character. Like she wasn't looking for trouble. He worked on her. He
Yeah.
worked on her. He met her, he liked her, and he showed up everywhere she was until she said yes. Like she was one of these people that sort of was like turning him down, and he just wouldn't go away. And then they ended up falling madly in love. So, just just keep that in mind with Tommy. Is like he's one of these guys who like gets what he wants at any means and has trouble being, rejected. A lot of times when you have one or a few people like that in a band, you might see massive success because they don't care who they're stepping on. Like Motley Crue is great, but I don't know that I would call them the best of those bands.
I really agree with you. I mean, I think that like they start off the band 81 to 83. That's the early start of it. The band gets together, they get the sound, it's loud, it's rude, it's aggressive. They've got this, crazy guitar player. They've got the bassist, Nikki Sixx, who's really the person who created the band and had like the big vision for what exactly he wanted it to be, you know, pulling through, and he kind of finds Tommy Lee, and it's like Tommy Lee's this like good-looking guy who's kind of a womanizer, like loves girls. And by like 1983, 84, they hook up with Ozzy Osbourne. They kind of become friends with Black Sabbath, Ozzy Osbourne, and they open for his 1984 tour, Bark at the Moon. And
Wow.
yeah, and so the band members were well known for their backstage antics, outrageous clothing, extreme high-heeled boots, heavily applied makeup, and seemingly endless abuse of drugs and alcohol.
Yes.
The first album they had put out, which I talked about before, Too Fast for Love, was then followed by Shout at the Devil, which was then followed by the third album, Theater of Pain, which was released in 85.
Theater of Pain.
Theater of Pain. And it was like definitely the glam metal phase in the band's style. Then they released their fourth album, Girls, 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 which is one of their most well-known albums, and that debuted at number 2 on the Billboard 200 charts. Nikki Sixx has said in interviews that he believes the album would have debuted at number 1 if it had not been behind the scenes maneuvering by Whitney Houston's record label, who took the number 1 spot. So Whitney's record was number 1. Girls, Girls, Girls came in at number 2. In 1987, Nikki Sixx, suffered from a heroin overdose. He was declared clinically dead on the way to the hospital, but the paramedic, who was a Motley Crue fan, revived Nikki Sixx with 2 shots of adrenaline. His
Whoa.
2 minutes in death were the inspiration for the song Kickstart My Heart, which peaked at number 16 on the mainstream US chart and was featured on 1989's Dr. Feelgood, which was their first US number 1 album. And from 86 to 87, Sixx kept a daily diary of his heroin addiction and eventually entered rehab in 1988, prompting the band to cancel their planned tour dates for that year. So then Motley Crue continued to put out albums, lawsuits, all this stuff. Highly, highly recommend, if you check out one Motley Crue album, I really think Girls, Girls, Girls is probably my favorite Motley Crue album. I remember buying that for my brother when he got his own car, and it had a CD player in it. And I was like, gave him a few albums, and he's like, Motley Crue. I was like, you're going to need this album. You're going to, and he would listen to it all the time. And now he's become this like pretty big Motley Crue fan. And I think it's a
Uh,
cool way to like get into metal in I don't want to say like a gentle way, but because it's
more
not,
melodic.
yeah, it's
More
more
melodic.
melodic. It's not super heavy. And obviously Guns N' Roses too. That's metal too. But I
Yeah.
think more people are familiar with Guns N' Roses than Motley Crue. Guns N' Roses is a little bit even more mainstream and kind of became even more popular and was much bigger. But
Hmm.
let's talk about that handsome devil, Tommy Lee, and the connection to Pamela Anderson. So we talked about before how he was married to Playboy playmate Pamela Anderson. And Tommy Lee, as a guy who loves the ladies, he actually has been married 4 times. His first wife
Wow.
was Elaine Starchuk, whom he married in 1984, divorcing a year later. Then in 86, he married for the second time to actress Heather Locklear. And then they divorced in 1993. And that marriage, if you watch the Motley Crue biographical film, The Dirt, and that's also in the book, The Dirt, you see some of the behind the scenes with Heather Locklear and Tommy Lee in there. Before he met Pamela Anderson, he was engaged to model Bobby Brown. And then 4 days after meeting Pamela Anderson, they got married.
Right.
And they have two sons together, Brandon Thomas Lee, who's the one that was passed the script for The Last Showgirl by Coppola and then gave it to his mom, and Dylan Jagger Lee. The two of them, they got divorced in 1998 and were involved in a custody battle over their sons until both were granted joint custody in 2002. And although divorced, the couple reunited briefly upon Lee's release from jail, but eventually split again in 2001. From 2002 until 2003, Lee was engaged to dancer Marty Garcia, who was an ex-wife of Prince, and she had sang on Tommy Lee's album Never a Dull Moment, and she toured with him. And then in 2008, he got back with Pamela Anderson.
What?
Yeah, they were in 2008. Tommy and Pam were back together and living with each other and their children, but they split for good again soon after.
Yeah.
Now, let's just get into a little bit about what you mentioned before, which is the sex tape that the two of them had. So they're married, and married couples, and even whoever, I think if people are consensually agreeing, like, this is okay, you, in for the privacy of yourself, everybody's on board, you should be able to do whatever you want, right? But as you said, somebody stole this tape that they had made together on this houseboat on Lake Mead, Arizona, that they had made for themselves. And so in 1995, somebody stole it. They released it onto the internet in 1997, and it became a prime example of viral pornography. According to that book, The Dirt, Lee claims that he was having work done at his house, and a person who, according to the book, was a former porn star by the name of Rand Gauthier, working at the house, found the tape and he sold it. And during the video, Lee infamously blew the boat's horn, and Anderson sued the video distribution company, Internet Entertainment Group. They never received a financial settlement agreement with IEG. Pamela Anderson dropped the case to concentrate on her mental health and her children. Thereafter, the company began making the tape available to subscribers to its websites, again, tripling the normal traffic on the website. A fictionalized miniseries, Pam and Tommy, debuted on Hulu in 2022, chronicling the theft and the distribution of the stolen tape.
Basically, a guy was doing work at his house and Tommy was being so difficult. Tommy was being psycho and difficult, having him tear it down, rebuild, asking him to do all these crazy things.
Wow.
And then he didn't deliver the way that Tommy wanted him to. And so Tommy didn't pay him because he was like above it. And that's like a thing that he had a history for, being like, I'm not paying you. And so the guy stole the tape and didn't feel bad at all. He was a guy who was a former porn actor who was like down on his luck and had no money. That's still not right. It's just saying that it was sort of like a one of these scenarios where like one thing makes the other thing much worse. That was a time where like VHS recorders were just becoming like way more accessible. It was so much easier. You finally could just record onto the thing that you're actually sticking into your VCR. It wasn't like tape had to be converted and blah 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 blah. It's like you could make something and it's immediately accessible. And so people were excited about it the way we are. People were excited about their phones. And so they were carrying them with them everywhere. And then on top of that, Tommy's like a guy who like likes himself and likes to see his, trophy wife. So that's another thing, but it wasn't a safe. They took the whole safe is what happened. They didn't.
No,
Yeah,
wow.
yeah, and people really wanted to say they were faking it. Like, oh, they leaked it. It's a whole thing. No, she's ne still never seen any money from it. Never. She let go for her mental health. She couldn't handle it. And I think there is also something to be said about them getting back together over and over. It's like they were both traumatized by that thing together. It drove them apart, but also they're the only two people who can really understand that probably and deal with that. That makes it harder to get into new potential relationships. And she didn't choose that. It's horrible. And I
She
think
did
the
not choose it.
no. And it's like just because you run around in a bikini and you have big boobs doesn't mean that you're a porn star. Do you know what I mean?
Right, right.
Yeah.
And I think this touches back even to what we were talking about with the film, The Last Showgirl.
Mm-hmm.
There's a certain type of thought process that if you do one type of thing, that must mean you do another type of thing.
That's
And that's
exactly
frankly
right.
just not true. It's
Yeah.
just not true. But
Well, even women with big boobs or like who tend to be like more curvy. Like, I mean, I'll speak for myself, but like I get a thing about being a redhead all the time. Like,
mm,
and especially like maybe in my younger years more, but a curvy redhead. People always like want to assume that curvy redheads are wild. And like you and I are performers, like we can turn it on. We know how to turn it on when we want to. It's like
mhm,
you are trained to turn it on for a camera. You
mhm,
are trained to
mhm.
slip in all these different roles at any given time as a performer. And so I know how to turn that on, and you know how to turn that on. And if you turn it on in a photo, there's going to be a whole class of people who think just one way about it. And it's one of those things that you like have to accept in being a performer. It's like
Oh,
you get
completely.
typecast, all that kind
Oh
of
my
stuff.
God.
Yeah.
And even as a musician, right? I mean, I'm sure you've had this happen too. I remember talking to
I know what you're
somebody,
going to say. I know
they
what you're going to say.
well, they just thought I did a ton of drugs because they're
Yeah.
like, oh, you're a musician and you tour. Like, wow, you must party. You must like do all these drugs. You must like to drink. You must. I'm like, what? No, I don't. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not down with doing tons of drugs. No, what are you talking about? Like,
Yeah.
if you're real, and I hate to say it this way, but this is really the truth. Like, yeah, there's bands like Motley Crue and all these other bands that was part of what, the image that they put out, right? But like, if you're an actual dedicated performer and you're going to the stage because that's your profession, you frankly just can't do it. I mean, I at least don't have the type of stamina where I could be like hammered every night on tour and then get
Mm.
up and play a show and do it well. That's just not functional. It's like not I wouldn't be able to do it physically. I couldn't handle that. I mean, even when we were on tour with our tribute band, right? It's like we weren't drinking every night.
Yeah.
Most of our band doesn't even drink. The
No.
things that people even say about Guns and Hoses sometimes, I'm like, you guys don't even friggin' know us, man.
Yeah. It's
Like,
like no, it's like
hilarious.
we're sleeping in, we're getting up to go like see have cultural experiences.
It's like, let's get on the tour van and do facial masks.
That's
Okay,
exactly right.
who
That's
needs more
exactly.
hydration? It's so the opposite of what people think it
Yeah.
is. It's kind of
Yes.
absolutely.
Just to like sum it all up together, it feels like a beautiful moment of redemption for her. And like maybe she gets justice out of just playing this role, showing that she's so much more than everything she's ever been. I love that she's in all of her PR and interviews, she's showing up with no makeup on. She's showing
Mm-hmm.
what she looks like. She is not, she
Mm-hmm.
needs no mask anymore. She is
Mm-hmm.
not, she does not care. She's like,
Mm-hmm.
this is me. I am cool. I'll put makeup on when I feel like it, but
Mm-hmm.
most of the time I don't need it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And you're going to have to look at it because this is real. I just love that attitude. And I love that she is being shown in the light that she deserves, you know?
Totally. Oh yeah,
Yeah. Hmm.
absolutely. She's also such a huge animal rights advocate, and she strikes me as being a person with such a huge heart, just very
Hmm.
sweet. And I
Yeah.
think like that's probably why so many things impacted her so heavily
Yeah.
with the stuff that happened in
Yeah.
her life.
Yeah, we could go on and on and on about it too. Just like put yourself in her shoes. Like, I don't know, a lot of people wouldn't have made it through that. You know what I mean? There are some specific personalities who would not have made it through that. That's like a violation on the craziest level. And then the whole world saying that you like volunteered it and you're a certain kind of person and blah blah blah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, rock stars are actors, people who work on Baywatch, they're just people. They're at home, sitting in
Hmm.
their pajamas, eating microwave meal. If they're lucky, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
Their hair gets greasy. they get eczema. Do you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
it's like they're people, and it's like we want to attach all these things to people we see struggle because I don't know, like as sensitive souls, our brains can't like take it or something. It's like, oh,
Mm,
that can't possibly be true that this horrible thing is happening to somebody. It's like it's fine because she has money, or it's fine because of this. It's like she's definitely getting money behind the scenes. It's no, think about how, you never know. You never know. That's the whole thing. So it's like people go
yeah.
through really hard stuff, women in particular. Men go through hard stuff too, but women really, really have a whole, like when it comes to sexuality, they have a whole different set of fragile, balls to juggle. Sorry, did you like that?
Yeah, no, yeah. I think there is also a little bit of that feeling of like, well, what did she think was going to happen? Like, if you play with fire, you're going to get burned. Like, why would she even let her? Let's be honest, husband, they were
Yeah,
married when they made the
yeah,
sex tape, okay?
yeah.
Why did she let her husband even tape her? Why,
Hmm.
she's a Playboy playmate. She's fine with showing her body.
Yeah,
Not, no, like,
yeah,
not like that. I think
yeah,
it's a violation, but I think you're right in the sense of people vindicating it and thinking, well, you get what's coming to you. You like
yeah.
do all this sexy stuff. Of course, it's like one step further over the cliff, which I can understand that perspective, but that's something that's based in almost like just misogyny.
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
It's also giving zero room for error, meaning like
Yeah.
everybody has messed up. Everybody has been taken over by like love and passion well, I don't know about everybody, but most people can understand being taken over by love and passion, especially when you're young. These people were also on drugs, so there's an extra part of it that's violating. Or Tommy Lee specifically was suffering from addiction at the time, not making clear choices. And there should be forgiveness for that, not like, oh, you deserve it. Like, it's not, addiction isn't the person's fault, it's a disease. And then on
Yeah.
top of that, the dynamic between Tommy and Pam. I mean, she was trying to trust her husband. There's so many things that like go into it.
Oh.
Yeah. Anyways, just to bring this episode full circle, this is a happy ending for Pam.
Yes, this is
Right.
a happy ending for Pam, and I look forward to seeing her hopefully be in more films in the future. I think that she still has a lot to give, and I think there's a lot of these actresses I want to see more from. I want to see more from Demi Moore. I want her back. Like I
Me
want
too.
Pamela Anderson back. I want, a lot of these people I want them to have more opportunities. I want there to be more work for them.
Anyways, I loved this movie. I'm glad you loved it too. What's your record vinyl rating? I know mine.
Okay, my final record rating is a 7. What's
Mine's
yours?
8.
As a director, Gia Coppola, I'm excited to see her work continue. I lost the end. I think there was a lot of really powerful moments throughout the film. I think the story was fantastic. I loved that it had this like sense of being so grainy. And you definitely got this feel for the city of Las Vegas. I think we could have gone a little bit uglier maybe in some ways, but not from even a story sense. I'm talking about just from like, I
The
don't know.
look?
Yeah,
Well, the
maybe.
thing is Vegas is
But
not
it's
that
all it's all
ugly.
it's all opinion, right?
Well, like Vegas is not that ugly. Maybe you
We'll
need
see. I've never been to Vegas, so I
so
don't
that
know, Emmy.
So that's the whole thing. It's like it showed what it's really like there to live there. It's like there's a lot of nice condos. They were all built in the 80s. It really came up during like the condo building really happened in the late 70s and 80s. So it's sort of like more like that. But
Yeah.
there's a lot of new builds. It's strip malls. It's like, you know, there's a lot of trailer parks there because people like retire there. And so, but I wouldn't say that it's ugly. If anything, it's like sort of new looking because of the how new the city is, and it really feels more suburban. Like most real life there is not the strip. It's like suburban outlying areas. And so that's kind of like the non-glamorous side. These are like blue collar people working in these shows, living blue collar lives. And so
Yeah.
I did like that side of it. If anything, it ended quick. I like the ending because you know how I feel about life's not fair. It's like, well, we can take things really hard and we can let them crush us if we want to. But if instead you see the good in what those disappointments have to offer, like you are going to be 10 times happier of a human being. And I feel like this was moment, the ending was a moment of getting slapped in the face with reality. And after her like resisting and resisting and resisting, the ending was sort of being slapped in the face, and then she was like, well, I guess I'll move to Arizona and see my kid and maybe I'll get to. And it's like they showed all that positive stuff in just like a little nugget. They could have elaborated more on that. I see that. And that's honestly the only reason I would give it an 8. It's like it had the opportunity to be a perfect film.
It's interesting, right? Because it's like, I guess when I say make it uglier, I just mean in the sense of and this is just a stylistic thing. I think as a director, I don't know her yet.
Yeah.
I think that like there's something about certain directors, you see 2 minutes of their film, you know who that director is.
Mhm.
I don't see a strong voice yet. I think that she has the potential to. I don't know.
I sort of see what you're saying. It it wasn't a glass of pineapple juice, it was a pineapple seltzer.
Yeah. It's one of these things where I'm not speaking negatively. I'm just saying I think there's room to grow.
Yeah.
I would have liked to see, empty shoes on the floor. I would have liked to see the fake eyelashes sitting on the makeup counter. Like, I would have liked to see crusty makeup that's like left over. I want to see like the empty seats. I want to see, but
Blisters on her feet.
this is
Yeah.
like that's a directorial choice that
Hmm.
we're not doing these like super zoom in. We're doing a certain kind of framing, a certain kind of color, a certain kind of shot. Does it work for the film? Yes. Do we capture the amount of loneliness in some parts? I just think there could have been a little bit more. She's obviously talented.
Hmm.
She obviously knows a good script when she sees one. She's
Yes.
got the family connections. We know that. So I feel like she has the potential to really become a great director.
She's on a great track. You're absolutely
She's
right.
on a fantastic track. I
Yeah.
mean, like the performances that she captured from Pamela Anderson, it was like
You
salty
cried.
tears.
Yeah, you cried.
I cried. Yeah. There was moments, I mean, just watching it like really hit just this ache of like a regret you can't get back. You felt that for that woman.
This has been such a fun episode. I love this movie. You guys, please follow us on our social media. We are Video and Vinyl Club on Instagram and TikTok. And please leave us a 5-star review wherever you are listening. 5-star reviews are what changed the game for us. Every single one helps. So we implore you, we ask you, we appreciate you for leaving those 5-star reviews.
Absolutely. Thanks for all the support that you give us. We want to hear your thoughts about Pamela Anderson. We want to hear your thoughts about the band Motley Crue. We want to hear your thoughts about this film. Comment and share these episodes. Thanks so much for all your support. Emmy, fabulous as always. Kisses to you. See you again soon.
Love you. See you next week.
Bye.
Bye.